Hi, everyone, and welcome to Fail Forward Live. And I am thrilled to have my next guest today, Corporate Vice President at Microsoft, Gavriella Schuster. Gabriella, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Michelle.
Well, I have been a longtime fan of you personally and professionally. I love your authenticity, your passion for women and diversity in technology, and your leadership. Oftentimes, there's so many channel chiefs that just seem so unapproachable, and you're just one of those people that is visible every day and in every part of our ecosystem, and such a good representation for our channel and our partners around the world. So, I'm curious. Did you always know that you wanted to work in technology?
No, I didn't. So, as a matter of fact, my first job was at Cigna, which is a large healthcare provider in the U.S. And I went in a management training program, and their whole goal in that was to teach me how to be a great manager and a leader. And so I started there and. I didn't get into technology until about 5 years later. My husband and I moved to Seattle. And, even back in the early 90s, it was a bit of a high tech hub. And I was like, oh, look, there's so much we could do here. And so I joined a company called Aldus, which was one of the first desktop publishing solutions later purchased by Adobe.
Wow. And so, was that your very first job that you ever had, or was that your first job in corporate America?
That was well, okay. I started working when I was 14. So yes, I guess
Okay.
it wasn't my
First-
very first job, but first it was my first job after college
Got
was working with Cigna.
So, inquiring minds want to know, what was your very first job at 14 years old, and what did it teach you?
Well, so I was a bus girl. I
Ah,
bus tables at a local kind of muffin coffee shop where mostly truckers came in. And I was promoted to waitress about 4 months in. Um, and uh, and yeah, I loved that, right? Because you would go serve like muffins and coffee, and you would get paid as much in tips as the whole bill, right?
wow, amazing. You must have had a really good customer experience from the beginning.
So
That's amazing.
what I learned from that was every job can be fun. You just turn it into a game, right? And the game I had was can I make my customer smile?
Ah, I love that. That is such a good lesson early on that takes you throughout your entire journey for sure. That's amazing. So, looking back, you've had an amazing career. You work for one of the largest companies in the world in senior leadership positions. What advice would you give young Gabriella at 21 years old as she's about to embark into the world?
Well, there's a couple things, right? One is nothing is permanent.
Mm,
So, you make a decision, you make a mistake, you make a decision to go do something, and it's not permanent, right?
mm.
You can always decide, this is great, or this didn't work out. I'm going to do something different. And so, I would tell myself not to fret so much about every single decision. I think the other thing that I would tell myself is that, don't try and be perfect. There is no such thing as perfect. Everything can always improve, and getting to the 80% is oftentimes good enough, and where you really want the collective, all of those around you, to help make it the perfect solution. So don't worry about trying to get all the way there, and don't try to do it on your own.
I love that. And that's a very valuable segue. And I thank you for that. For my next question, not getting there alone. I know so many people talk about mentors, sponsors, a board of advisors that help them on their journey. So if you had to reflect on your three biggest mentors in your life, professionally or personally. Who were they and what did they teach you?
Oh, well, so there have been so many along the way, but I think the ones that stand out to me the most are Bill Vecti. He was a longtime Microsoft executive, and I worked for him a number of times in a number of different roles. And what he taught me was the value of having that mental model from the start, right? So when you're going to start an initiative or a project, you have to be able to articulate what is your construct and how are you thinking about it. And so we'd always start with, just don't tell me any details, just give me, what's your mental model, right?
Right.
And that became an amazing structure for me to go from, the mental model, and then what are your principles and what's your vision, and
Mm,
then you start filling it in. And that's the best way to start really engaging people in filling that in with you, as opposed to you trying to do something on your own or diving too deep before you're ready. I think, another great, mentor for me was Phil Sorgen. So again, somebody that I worked side by side with, and then I worked for a couple of different times. And he was a great ally for me. And
mm,
he grew with me. So I would challenge him. He had a very open mind, and together he would challenge me back, and we would construct things that were bigger than what either of us thought. And
wow.
it really showed me the value of allyship and partnership. Um,
Mm,
and then another great mentor for me was Brad Anderson. Brad Anderson was also a longtime Microsoft executive, and now I believe he's the president at Qualtrics. And he was on the engineering side. And when I made my very first transition out of licensing business model development into product management and engineering, he really helped me make that transition and understand how to translate my experience and speak with credibility with
mm.
the engineering teams.
I think that's so phenomenal, right? To have the ability to learn how to communicate the way your audience wants to be heard, and also your constructive feedback, right? Challenging each other to think bigger and broader and differently, and being willing and able to accept constructive feedback, which I think many people have to work on. It's hard to receive feedback sometimes if it doesn't. If it makes you uncomfortable, but you won't grow without it, right? So
Exactly.
that's amazing. So for me, the premise of why I began this podcast, for anyone who's never heard it before, is pretty simple. I was the first in my family to go to college. I was the first to get my MBA. I was the first to work in technology. And I have been a huge believer and advocate that the power of technology not only changed the way the world lives and works and plays and learns, but there's so much opportunity, and that diversity of thought is so important. But when I first started out, I would see people at your level, executives, and I would think, that they were untouchable, that they've never failed at anything. And then I got to see and meet the real people as I excelled in my career. And I learned so many of what everybody experiences, challenges and stumbling blocks and failing forward. And so the premise of this program really is to understand some of the challenges you might have experienced along your journey, and how it can help share some wisdom for people that are also trying to embark forth on a journey maybe similar to yours. So, in your life, what would you say the biggest failure you've experienced was, and what wisdom did it impart in you in your journey?
It's a great question, Michelle. So what I would say is that I think that in every project and everything I've ever done, there's moments of failure. And I look at it very much, life is very much like a corn maze, right? Where, there is a way out, but it's probably not the first way you're going to go. So you're going to head in different directions. You're going to end up in a dead end. You have to backtrack, find the right way. And a lot of times it's really in how are you defining the problem to help you find how you define the solution and how you find it. And so when I look back, I actually, not a lot of things stand out as like a big failure, because for me, they were just great learning opportunities. And eventually I was able to find the path forward, right? I didn't get stuck. But one of the ones I can share with you is about, gosh, I don't even know. It must have been, well, it was probably about 20 years ago, maybe 18 years ago. I started this role where I was supposed to build this operating model and business framework that would help organizations assess, manage, and adopt technology. So this was like in the late 90s, and a lot of organizations were first starting to learn what technology could do for their businesses. And so I built this team, and about 13 months into our investments and time into this project, what I realized was that most organizations who took this assessment that we had built, and it was a technology adoption assessment, were not really ready for the technology that they were about to purchase. And and I realized that would be pretty counterproductive for Microsoft to go and consult with them, do this assessment, and basically show them all of the areas that they were not ready to adopt the technology.
Right.
And so I was like, wow, we have to take a completely different direction with what we're trying to do here, and not actually like focus on the assessment, but maybe what we learn from the assessment and how we build other assets that kind of anticipate those challenges but don't actually expose those challenges to the customer. So we
Well,
we basically had to scrap the whole project, right? And it
wow.
was a devastating realization because I had to kind of dismantle the team, and felt like I was giving up my baby for adoption, and then reconstruct into a completely different model and business model from what we had been doing. And so it was a painful, it was probably one of the most painful lessons. And so what I learned from that was the importance of doing pilot testing, right? Of socializing an idea really broadly, and even with your customer, right? So that you could get, like, I would have probably gotten those insights much sooner if we had socialized it with a set of customers and piloted it before we had invested so much.
Right.
And I gained a great deal of leadership experience through that as well. So I treasure that time, and I don't believe it was a waste at all. As I look back, right? I mean, a number of my other successes wouldn't have happened if I hadn't had that learning, but it was painful.
No, that's a very good point. And I love the idea of checking in and crowdsourcing and getting and welcoming that diversity of thought, especially from your cross-functional teams and your customers prior, because that I hear that more often than not on this show, actually, as one of the biggest takeaways is that people tend to launch something really exciting and they didn't really have a feedback before they did that was it valuable, is this truly the pain point, are we solving the right thing or overwhelming the person? So that's a really valuable takeaway, and I'm going to use that corn maze analogy in my mind in the future. I think that's a great analogy. So now I mentioned, of course, my story, and you are a phenomenal advocate, as I aforementioned, for women and diversity. If anyone has not seen your TED Talk, Become an Ally, I think it's absolutely incredible. And it was life changing for me personally. Like, you shared so much insight and wisdom in just a few words in a few minutes that I took away. And I know many of us have. So, why are you so passionate about women and diversity in technology?
Well, so in addition to just my own experiences, where I have seen how much it can damage a team when they don't have diversity, when
Mm,
they don't have someone challenging the status quo, or challenging kind of that groupthink method that people tend to get into. I've seen that. I've also been on the receiving end of being minimized and marginalized in a conversation because I was a minority in that room.
mm,
And I think that in order to drive for innovation, and there's a lot of actual research now that shows teams that have more diversity have more innovation. If we want to continue to lead with technology and drive democratization of technology, we need that diversity. And why I'm so passionate about gender diversity in particular is because it's on the decline. It's not getting better, it's getting worse. And I thought that even just by participating in the industry for the last 30 years, that I would be able to make a difference. And what I realized is it's just not. Fewer women are entering the technology fields, and this is the highest growth market for the around the world is technology. Technology is moving out of just an industry of technology and into every industry. And if we continue on the path that we are, then women will become even more marginalized within the working just the workforce as a whole, right? Women make up 51% of the workforce, but in technology make up less than a quarter of the workforce. And the pandemic has made it worse.
right.
15.5 million women have lost their jobs, or 37% of the female workforce. And digital transformation threatens to displace even more women because of the jobs they currently hold. We have an incredible opportunity with the advent of artificial intelligence, where about, I think the predictions are over the next decade, 180 million jobs will be created through AI. We need to make sure that women claim at least half of those jobs. And so, that's where I'm coming from is really, I'm very passionate about this because I think driving for that level of diversity is what's going to continue to power the tech industry, and I think is critical for society.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. There's so many gems of wisdom, the opportunity, the flexibility, the rich culture, and the ability to make great discretionary income and have flexible work schedules. It would seem as there's so many benefits for women and just people to have that work life integration in careers and technology. And that's why you and I feel like, are so passionate to get them to attract and retain and promote women, because I think that that's the biggest portion of this as well. We've seen, and I love when you mention your mentors, many of them were men. And we see in the Sheryl Sandberg study recently, after the Me Too movement, 65% of men said they felt uncomfortable mentoring or being alone with women. So there's this huge disproportionate ability where if you're not growing a bench or grooming or training women to take your place and be your predecessor and raise in the ranks, then we'll lose them and we'll lose the ability to have equity in the workplace as well. And to your point about AI, I recently, about a year ago, before the pandemic, gave a speech at IT Nation. And I discussed some of those things where unconscious bias is being built in because the majority of the people building AI are white middle aged men. And so you're losing the people of color, you're losing the women, and you're losing the ability to overcome some of the unconscious biases that exist in this technology. And even just the fact that some of the names and the gender roles that are given. So, for example, Siri and Alexa do more administrative tasks, where Watson and some of the other ones are doing more technical, high level engineering tasks. And so it's this very disproportionate, unconscious, unrealized bias. And definitely we need to have equal representation. It's more profitable and better success for the company, for the culture, and for your customers, right?
Yeah, no, as a matter of fact, according to the IMF, closing labor force participation rates in countries with the largest gaps would expand their GDP by 35%.
Wow. Incredible. I
So,
mean,
I mean, it is absolutely critical, and knowing that technology is a way in, is that wedge. I think it's critical. And to your point, that is on my TED talk. That's pretty much my whole point, right? My point is that men need to step up and become allies. And my framework around connect, outreach, mentor, and empower is all about how to become an ally. So, I talk to a lot of men now who are afraid to act, afraid to speak because they don't want to offend, or they just don't know what to say, or they're worried about being accused of anything, right?
mm,
Um,
right.
but it is more important now than ever that men become allies in this drive for gender equity and take intentional action to connect with women, to bring them into their organization, bring them onto their board of directors, bring them into their leadership team, to mentor them, to sponsor them, and to create an inclusive environment by empowering them.
I love that so much. Absolutely. Now, in terms of yourself, what resources inspire you? What resources get you excited, focused, books that you read, podcasts you listen to, things that really motivate you?
It's a great question. I mean, I love reading books. I consume them constantly. Some of my favorite authors are Brené Brown. Really encouraging all of us to kind of look deep and be vulnerable and be okay with failing, and be okay with being our authentic selves. Um, Authors like Greg McCowan, Tara Moore, who talks about talking big. She great advice for women around how we ourselves may minimize ourselves, and how do we break through that, and how do we create a different frame of mind. Brendan Burchard has some great books around high performance, how to build high performance teams, and how to get the most out of yourself through high performance. And it's a lot of mindfulness activities that you might do. And then Adam Grant, really, talking about, how do we pay it forward? How do we not look at every transaction, I guess, in our lives, or every relationship in our lives in terms of what can I get out of this? But how do you actually give freely of yourself and your time, knowing that that's a pay it forward.
Mm, powerful, very powerful. So I'm going to ask a lightning round question. If
Okay.
you could jump into my shoes and ask yourself anything I haven't asked you yet, what would you ask?
Okay. Well, let's see. Two things. This show is about failing forward, and I believe that's critical. So many people hold themselves back because they have a fear of failure and a desire for perfection, right? So, both completely unattainable. So, embrace the failure and the risk. You cannot be successful without failure, right? The second is, I would ask your listeners to make a commitment to become allies, to drive for gender diversity, and to think about what they can do in their own lives to become an ally, and to support more diversity within their lives, within their networks, within their organizations.
Ah, I love it. Gabriella, you've inspired me once again. Where can our listeners contact you if they want to get a hold of you and learn more?
Well, so I am pretty easy to find. Just by my name, if you spell it right, I am the only one that comes up. If you go on to Google search, um, and you can find me on LinkedIn by looking for my name, and then all of my contact information is right there.
Wonderful. Thank you, Gabriella, for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure, as always. I appreciate everything you've shared with us, your personal journey, and what you learned, and how we can help others also learn, fail forward, and grow. So, thank you to our listeners, and I hope you all have a great day.
Thanks, Michelle.